This is part 3 of reading of Toy Town. I apologize for the abrupt end to part 2. One of my daughters, my 13-year-old daughter, Olivia, called, and the call was coming in. Rather than re-record it, I had most of it done, but her call came in right as I was coming to the end of part 2. It was great, though. I took the call, and she's working on writing some songs and writing lyrics, and um, she wanted to share it with me, so it was wonderful. I'm glad I took it. And then I recorded part 3, which I'm about to re-record right now, and it messed up and read the whole thing and it didn't work. So those kind of things happen, I guess. This isn't much more incredibly harder than I thought, reading stories, uh, for me at least, on YouTube and recording them, but I'm glad that I'm doing it. So without any further ado, down in the descriptions you'll see a link to part 1, so that you can start at the beginning if you haven't. But this is part 3 of Toy Town. Where we left off in part 2, there were people across the street yelling snide remarks to Johnny and Phil, who were getting ready to go in, and their friend Nick is standing with them, waiting to go into the cottage. Nick encouraged them, saying, "You guys are lucky. Hey, no venture, no gain. You're adding the add to adventure. They're just jealous haters." Nick looked back over his shoulder at the other town people who stood a good 100 feet away. No physical barriers kept them at that distance. They just seemed hesitant. There are so many rumors about this place. Some superstitious and myths had become strong, restricted convictions. People had convinced themselves that this hut was the hub of a supernatural dwelling and an abode of paranormal activities. Johnny heard the business people raving about what a big opportunity this was for them and or their companies, and how they were going to get in there just to meet the crazy old man and or whoever took over. They spoke as if they weren't sure if the original owner was dead or alive. They talked about their offers to buy the property for some real developmental progress. One man was overheard saying something about how his grandfather was there when they built the place. Others exchanged business cards and talked of merging their resources to make the highest bid to retain the property. Phil awkwardly looked at John and said, "Psst, Toy Town. Yeah, right. This isn't a thing for kids. This is a waste of time." Johnny said, No, it's going to be great. This is a toy shop. Again, who knows? Just because it looks run down on the outside, inside, it's probably awesome. Have some faith." Phil combated. "Faith in what? Faith in who?" Johnny wanted to tell Phil what his mother told him about a friend of the family being involved with the cottage's history, but he didn't know enough himself to share any helpful details. He still tried to assure Phil, "These business typhoons are the ones who are going to feel out of place once we get inside." Phil started to raise his voice in rage as he spouted back at Johnny, "Yeah, right. This place is just a freaking house. Some old man, some paranoid manic madman has lived in there alone and been tinkering for years just to fool this whole town into thinking that there's something so amazing in there just to take our money and give nothing in return." Johnny started to see the old Phil. "Phil, why give up hope? Why not just enjoy the mystery? Our imaginations may be painting a better picture than what it is really like, but we didn't pay 1 cent for these passes. Who knows? It might even be better than we think." Nick could hear the boys beginning to argue as he was walking to join the others across the street. He shouted back, "Hey, just check it out. Let us know what it's like in there. Phil turned toward Nick to cast his verbal insult. Shut up, Stubby! Johnny was shocked. He thought Phil had found that it's better to be genuinely nice to people and stop all the name calling. He also realized that the name Phil called Nick was the disrespectful name Johnny himself had given Nick the night they were going to sneak in. Johnny was disappointed in himself that he had become like the bullies he couldn't stand. Johnny ripped the invitation out of Phil's hand. Hey, give me that, Phil shouted. Johnny said, You're not kind-hearted. You just faked your way into this, what I call a friendship. Phil admitted, Yeah, so? The adults shook their heads, and one said to the other, That's why children should not be eligible to purchase tickets to enter. Johnny turned with the partially ripped paper in his hand and addressed them. It is a complimentary invitation, ladies and gentlemen. It's a workshop to make toys for kids. We call it Toy Town. He stopped there, but he wanted to question their motivations for entering. They just shook their heads and overlooked him. Nick! Johnny shouted. Nick, come here! Phil stood there, feeling the cold rain coming down on him heavier now than before. He watched as Johnny gave the invite to Nick. What the? Phil began. The boys started to push, shove, and fight. Johnny's mom was not able to be there in the crowd, but there was an uncle of his and a close member of the family Johnny never officially met. The two men ran over and broke the boys up. One of the businessmen helped as well. The uncle pulled Phil away from Johnny and back toward the crowd watching. The others, waiting to go in, stood in front of Nick and Johnny. They turned their backs and shook off the juvenile behavior. Johnny said to Nick, You're going in with me. Nick exclaimed, That's fine with me. Cool. Phil just scoffed from a distance. Whatever, dudes. I didn't want to go in anyway. As he stormed away, he fooled himself into believing that, when in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. The entrance. The front door squeaked as it opened slowly. The spectators moved a little closer to try to catch a glimpse of the inside, while the 12 guests moved out of the rain, under the water pouring off the wooden shingle roof, and into the foyer of the long-time legendary home. A middle-aged man greeted them. I suppose you were expecting Mr. Old Man Dreammaker. They all let out a nervous chuckle. The man smiled, teeth white as snow. He continued with his welcome. Well, I'll be showing you around today. I've heard the rumors about this haunted mad shack. At least, I think that's what most people are saying. But I'm here to show you, ladies and gentlemen. Then, looking down at Johnny and Nick with a warm-hearted smile, and younger gentlemen, you're about to have questions answered about this house and this property that this town has had since the original Mr. Dreammaker put this house here. This house is actually a town all of its own. He raised his voice and pointed one finger in the air like a statue as he stated, A town within a town. No one was sure what to make of this. One of the men with peppered-color hair said, Mr. Dream, no offense, sir, but who are you, if not, as you said, Old Man Dreammaker? And is there any worthy reason we should allow you to guide us through this cottage? Mr. Dream was still stuck in the statue position. They stared at him as the smile faded from his face. He slowly became unfrozen and spoke out of the corner of his mouth as he addressed the men and women. Oh, 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 I'm sorry. May I see your invitation, sir? The man pulled it from an inner pocket of his trench coat. Mr. Dream looked at it, examined it, and asked, "Did you buy this, sir?" The man puffed out his chest and insisted, "Of course I did. Are you assuming that I'm a fraud?" Mr. Dream's face was caught between a grin and a very serious poker face. "Oh, no, 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 sir. I would never make any assumptions about a man I don't know anything about." He smirked, then whispered with a hint of sarcasm, "You see, the thing is, sir, I don't know you. However, I know some things about you. I just don't know you personally." He got close to the man's face and finished, "Invitations are usually given to people that are known, and since I don't know you, well, you're not invited." Mr. Dream ran those last three words together. Johnny and Nick got a kick out of it. "Well," retaliated the man, "this is just a load of crock. Just like I thought. A load of crock. A scheme. A scam. Just to take our money and not allow us to invest in something that could be so much more." The man snatched the invitation from Mr. Dream's hand and stormed out, yelling, "You'll hear from my lawyer." When the man slammed the door, the whole shack shook a little, and drops of rain and mud dripped down from the ceiling. Outside, they heard the man being mobbed by the small town's press and media that had gathered that day. He was more than willing to share what he had just experienced inside. Mr. Dream said, "Does anyone else feel not invited?" Not one word was said. Mr. Dream didn't ask any more questions, and the business executives seemed to be relieved that he had not required them to show him their invitations. He simply moved right along. "Very good, then. Shall we move on? Bring your coats, umbrellas, shoes, hats, underpants, and anything else you may have on, and follow me." Mr. Dream stepped off with a skip through the foyer, past a nice warm fireplace, where he led them to a small box-shaped room resembling a walk-in closet. Mr. Dream explained, "This is one of the very first forms of an elevator. I'm sure some of you men and women recall the old ones." Some nodded. Johnny and Nick, along with some of the others, just looked at Mr. Dream for further explanation as he continued, "Everyone step in, please. I know it's tight fit, but then again, so are some of the vests you're wearing." Once packed inside the elevator, Mr. Dream talked through his actions. "Now I close this gate with these triangle shapes, or, what are they? Diamond-shaped thingies. And then I close this other one with these. Oh, with these. They're the same shape. I never noticed that before. Anyway, you close both of those, and then you, pull this handle, and..." One of the men from the back got impatient and spoke up. "Here, here. I know how to use it." He pushed his way to the front. Mr. Dream responded with sarcasm, "Oh, good. A man who knows how to use my elevator. Let him through. Let him through, people." Mr. Dream smiled and moved his hands as if he was parting the Red Sea. The man got to the front next to Mr. Dream. He spoke unusually close to the man's face. "Now, wait. Take us through from the start, 'cause we may just have to know how to use it to come back up to this floor. Maybe. I really hope to learn to use this the correct way someday. Wow, today is that day. Yippee! I may be here all by myself, all alone by myself one day, and need your guidance." As Mr. Dream opened the two fence-shaped doors, he patted the man on the back just hard enough to push him out of the elevator, and then cranked one knob. The doors closed, and the elevator shot down the shaft extremely fast. Everyone gasped. Mr. Dream smiled. "I guess he missed his ride," he smirked. The men held their hats. The ladies tried to keep their skirts from flying up. Nick's face was being lashed by one of the ladies' hair as it tossed up and around by the descent. Johnny loved the smell of whatever conditioners, cologne, and perfume that flew off their bodies and into the air around them on their journey down to who knows where. The elevator felt as if it was not going to stop. Then they felt it finally slow down. It actually bounced a little when it hit the bottom, coming to a complete stop. "Well, the parachutes and pillows still work. Let the fun begin." Mr. Dream opened the doors, and the guests stepped out. Their mouths dropped open. They could not barely take it all in. It was a whole town. Storefronts, roads, cars, trucks, and people walking in every direction. The boys were the first to notice that toys were a major part of the scene. Toys mixed in with all the pedestrians. They were rolling, hopping, sliding. Some of the toys were even being carried by people. The sound of a busy city filled the air. One of the taller businessmen said in awe, "It's a whole town." Mr. Dream replied, "You're good. You really pay attention to detail." The visitors had to listen close to hear Mr. Dream over the city's noise as he announced, "Well, I'm going fishing. Enjoy looking around and see yourself out. Ha!" I didn't mean for that to rhyme this time. With a wave, he simply walked away. The business executives could not let him get away so easy. They rushed and followed after him, each fighting for first place, begging not only for his undivided attention, but for the chance to hear what he thought of their offers. Johnny and Nick shrugged their shoulders and started to walk down the main street. They slowly began to realize the people they saw were not alive. They were reanimated people, like life-size toys. Johnny's mind went back to the rumors he had heard about the original owner. Maybe he didn't die, but was able to turn into something, some other type of creature like a toy. Nick felt like he was caught in a wonderful dream. "Johnny, slap me. This is cray-cray." "Yeah, but great," Johnny answered. They found some go-karts with a sign on them saying, "Drive me." The boys jumped in and drove through the streets. They finally discovered a racetrack and took a couple of laps before parking them so they could take to the streets on foot to see more. They were frightened when some type of a holographic image walked up to them and challenged them to a fun, friendly fight. Nick ducked as it took the first strike. He shouted, "Wow, whoa, check this, dude. This is like the game City Fight Club." Johnny laughed and said, "Yeah, but the challenger isn't in a box ready to KO a computer image of you. He's going for the real thing. Go for it." When Johnny shouted, the fight began automatically. While Johnny watched, he thought there was no way I'll be able to describe this to my friends. Nick cried out, "Jump in! Help, Johnny! The punches somehow send a funny electrical shock through me when it makes contact." Johnny just laughed and said, "It's not set up for two players, Nick. This is your fight." Nick laughed, but shouted, "I'm serious." "It doesn't look painful. Does it hurt?" asked Johnny. Nick said, "No, It actually kind of tickles." Nick ran into a store just off the street. The hologram followed, knocking down shelves and breaking through glass cases. Johnny followed them into the store, then ran out the back door of the store. He yelled for Nick to follow. Out back was a helicopter made to fit kids their size. Nick jumped in and Johnny flew them away. The ceiling of Toy Town was really high, not just basement high. From up in the helicopter, they could get a good view of the whole city. The length went on for miles. It didn't seem to end. Under that tiny shack outside was an entire city deep in what was more than just any average basement. It did literally go on for miles and miles underneath the city above. "This goes all the way under my house, down the street, and further," said Johnny. They loved how the ceiling was painted like clouds, and Johnny watched not to fly too high in order not to hit it. All of a sudden, there was a thud on the outside of the helicopter. Johnny looked. Nick pointed out an entire lineup of anti-aircraft fighting guns shooting hard pieces of foam at them. Nick cried, There's no place to land!" The foam was doing no damage to their aircraft, but they were still alarmed. This playtime was so real and convincing. He looked in the back and saw 2 parachutes. Johnny looked back as well. Then they looked at each other. They shot different words back and forth to each other, expressing their excitement. Radical, excellent, awesome. Then, in unison, they shouted, "Let's do it!" They strapped on the chutes and jumped, pulling the ripcord in order to not plunk too hard to the ground. Both boys laughed harder than they had ever laughed before. Johnny managed to get out the words, "Are you okay?" Nick couldn't stop laughing and just began to roll on the ground, yelling, "Yee-haw!" Their pre-adolescent voices cracked. "Look out!" Johnny expressed in a sudden rise of fear. Nick couldn't stop. He found himself sliding down a steep hill at a high speed. Nick was caught in between having fun and feeling sick to his stomach. The hill wasn't just a steep decline, but it was covered with snow. Johnny looked up. There were snowflakes drifting down in that section of the town. Johnny put his parachute under him and gave himself a shove, racing right behind his friend. At the bottom of the hill, the boys picked themselves up and brushed themselves off. There were no cold chunks of snow, leaving wet spots on their clothes. Nick confirmed, "Artificial snow," Johnny replied. "It felt real. We could play for hours and not even get cold." They realized they were never in any real danger. It was just one big fun adventure after another. "This is the best time I've ever had, Johnny." When Nick said that, it made Johnny feel warm and welcome. He felt like he was finally gaining a true friend. "Hey, what's that?" Johnny said, pointing to a shed behind Nick. All Nick could get out was, "Oh man, am I dizzy." Johnny finished the thought and confirmed that Nick wasn't seeing things. "It's the workshop, the cottage from down the street from our homes." They were looking at an exact replica of the shed that was far above them on their hometown streets. The boys went up and knocked. There was no response. Johnny had a flashback to that night he knocked. So they went in to look around. When they closed the door behind them, some dirty drops of water fell on their heads, just as it did when the man left at the start of the tour. The only thing different was that there seemed to be no elevator shaft. "Hey, Johnny, how do we get out of here, and when?" Johnny had been having so much fun, he admitted that he had not given any thought to that. The elevator that shot them down to Toy Town was at the other end of the building, as far as they could remember. They recall exiting from the elevator and looking back before the elevator doors closed. They saw it blended in with the wall of some brick building. "We gotta get back," said Nick. "Well," Johnny remarked, giving a mischievous grin. He then convinced Nick to hide with him there in the factory, the town, and come out after the place is shut down. Nick was a bit nervous, but also felt like Mr. Dream did not make it clear when they were supposed to leave. He just told them to show themselves out. Moments after those thoughts, a voice was heard coming from coming out of some well-hidden speakers that must have been throughout the whole town. It was Mr. Dream. "Attention, attention all. May I have your attention, please? I caught some really nice fish today, and I hope you had fun exploring Toy Town. It's time to close things down now. I thank you for coming, and, not too far in the future, I hope to open the town to the general public, if possible. Come back, please. Come back again. Now, make your way to the First National Bank in the center of the city where you came in. You will notice within the next few minutes a virtual sunset, and as the lights imitate the sun going down, the street lights will be used as a guide to lead you to the exit. Simply follow the streets that have the street lights on, and you can't miss it. Again, thank you for coming, and good night." Johnny went into the kitchen of the cottage. He opened the cabinets under the sink. "Johnny, no," said Nick, followed by a smile. "If we're going to hide, this is not the best hiding place. This is probably where the tour guide lives, that Mr. Dream Man." Johnny jumped up, clapped his hands, and said, "Well, lead on, Captain Nick." The boys walked down the streets that had its lights on. They had not seen anyone else. The business executives that came in with them were never seen again. Now it was obvious that they were the only ones on the streets, and probably in the whole town. While walking down the street, Johnny noticed the city sounds were replaced by crickets, frogs, and an occasional owl sound. He ducked down in a small alley. Nick followed. They tried doors that led into the alley, and finally found one unlocked. As they entered, they were glad to see that it was a back door to a very large department store. They made their way to the furniture department and hid under the beds. Nick started to whisper something. Johnny pressed his fingers against his lips, signaling him to stay quiet. Then he held up his palm up and face out, indicating to just wait. Nick understood. The boys heard some loud, muffled booms, probably the sound of generators that ran the town shutting down. They also heard what sounded like a high-pitched squeal dropping in speed and pitch until it was absolutely silent. Johnny still motioned to wait. After a good 20 minutes, Johnny whispered, Nick, you think he has security cameras or people and lasers?" Nick whispered back, "Nah, not down this low. I bet all the security would be on the top surface, in that old shed. No one can get down here without going through there." Johnny nodded, then asked softly, "Hey, you remember the faces and stuff we saw in the windows when I knocked that night?" Nick nodded as Johnny spoke in a hushed tone. "I think that knock set off an alarm, and those figures popped up in the windows to scare people away." Nick strained out, "Yeah, it worked." Johnny stifled a laugh. "So, let's go check things out." The boys slipped out from under the beds to go explore. Johnny said, "We'll never be able to describe to our friends all this fun we're having, but we'll have to try to capture the key moments. Let's head to the sports department." Neither one of them were very much into sports, but they sure did have fun trying out all the different equipment. I'm going to stop there to go on to part 4, down in the and the descriptions are the links if you need some help.